I think we are good to go. Welcome, everybody, to the stream. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Bill C-9 and how it wants to codify hatred. It wants to make vilification and detestation, willfully promoting hatred towards an identifiable group, or willfully inciting hatred against an identifiable group. They want to... that might lead to civil unrest, or a breach of the peace. This is what they want to criminalize in Canada under Bill C-9. It's actually a bill, or it's actually a law, a criminal law rather, that's already been in the books for over 50 years. On the criminal code, it's 319. If you want to learn about this stuff, then familiarize yourself with 319 in the criminal code. And but tonight I thought, vilification, detestation, these are things that I feel like I was subject to as a unvaccinated Canadian. These are things I feel I've been subject to just for being a critic of immigration. I feel like I've been detested and vilified for this. And I think you could make the argument as Christians have also been vilified and detested. And I thought it might be interesting to kind of go over all of these things, go over all of these examples. Not to say that, hey, we're going to use Bill C-9 against the government. We're going to use Bill C-9 against Christians. No, I'm not naive. I don't think that's going to work. But more so, I want to kind of air all this out, talk about these examples, because I think in that there might be an opportunity to kind of really make an argument, a stronger argument for a Canadian senator to be like, this is how absurd this is, that you want to, criminalize basically intensely held emotions, because I think everybody feels intensely held emotions, and trying to criminalize that is very dumb, very, very stupid. At one point I would like to go to the to our Twitter space that we got running here to to kind of hear some examples from people. I'll just go over some of the most obvious ones. I'm just on a live stream here for those on the Twitter space, but I'm going to play the clip of Justin Trudeau. He's on the French TV station, I think CBC Radio Canada, and he basically does a really good job at, I would say, vilifying the unvaccinated or anti-vaxxers.
Oui, on va s'en sortir de cette pandémie par la vaccination. Puis on en connaît tous des gens qui sont en train d'hésiter un petit peu. On va continuer d'essayer de les convaincre.
Let's see.
Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la vaccination.
Qui sont extrémistes.
Qui croient pas dans la science.
They are extremists. They're extremists who don't believe in science. They're often misogynists and also often racists. This is Justin Trudeau, our sitting prime minister at the time, talking about unvaccinated people or people who oppose the vaccines.
Misogyne, souvent raciste aussi. C'est une petite.
It's a small group, but they take up some space.
Groupe, mais qui prend de la place.
They're a minority.
Et là, il faut faire un
and we have to make a choice in terms of leaders, in terms of the country. Do we tolerate these people? Back in the day, civil rights used to be about protecting the minority. It used to be about, hey, like the smaller group that has a different opinion, we can't just demonize, detest, and vilify these people and treat them like shit, because that wouldn't be fair. That made sense maybe back in the day when there was, I don't know, more card-carrying racists around, I guess. But now things have changed, where having a certain political opinion will have you detested and vilified. And it'll even be endorsed or promoted by members of the government or Canadian institutions. So if you have any examples of that, it would be great to, kind of get into that, go over them, hash them all out. Because I feel like there's a lot. I feel like there's quite a few. And to bring up the definition, this is why it's relevant for C9, because the bill doesn't say detest and vilify anybody. Like, you can't just detest and vilify any one person. It's an identifiable group. This is what's actually in C9, identifiable group. An identifiable group is defined by identifiable groups means any section of the public distinguished by color, race, religion, national or ethnic origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or mental or physical disability. Now, despite religion being in there, after some of these churches burning down, there was someone from the BC Civil Liberties Association, Harsha Walia. She said, burn it down or something? What did she say? Let's look it up. Is it burn it down? To burn it all down. Yeah, so this was, let's see here. Marxist Harsha Walia, who openly campaigned to burn it all down, referring to church arsons and her public anti-Semitic views. All right, okay, here's a post from Karima. The same people who tried canceling me simultaneously defended Harsha Walia's right to say burn it all down amid a spat of church burnings. Walia and I both experienced social media pylons, although from opposite ends of the political spectrum. I produced a deliberately ambiguous comic about witch hunts against women who exercise their freedom of expression. Funny how things come full circle. Okay, here's the tweet. Yeah. Harsha Walia, burn it all down. And that's in response to a tweet that says 2 more Catholic churches have been torched in Canada amid ongoing reports of more than 1,000 unmarked graves of Indigenous children found at former residential schools. And if I'm not mistaken, Harsha Walia is or was the executive director of the BC Civil Liberties Association. So this is someone who's part of a civil liberties group saying burn it all down in reference to Christians. I don't know. That sounds like an example of willfully promoting hatred, willfully inciting hatred against Christians, willfully, I don't know, promoting violence, whatever it is. But, we also had Cancel Canada Day. Remember Cancel Canada Day? This was a very popular thing at the time. There were tons of people out and about. Cancel Canada Day. Was this like decolonize Canada? Cancel Canada Day. Is this not a sort of promotion, a mainstreaming of kind of hating colonizers or hating Sir John A. Macdonald, hating people who helped build the country? I'm trying to understand the sort of how this wasn't a sort of like mainstream promotional hatred of the history of the country. Is that an identifiable group? And it's kind of tricky because like maybe would that like be white people? Would that be like historical Canadians who we were hating? It's not really, cut and dry. But then again, it's like this is why the text in the bill is very, I think, irrelevant. I think it's like an old school definition of identifiable group. Like I said, that's like 50 years old. So I don't think that's a very good example of, I don't think that should be written into law, obviously. But let's see. What else? What were some other good ones? Oh, yeah. Albertans. Is there any examples of politicians distinctively kind of just hating all Albertans? Because you see it on social media all the time. Oh, Albertans are racist. People will say this all the time. Oh yeah, Alberta, that's just a province of racist people. Let's see. Okay, yeah, here's a good one. What do we got here? There's planned protests tomorrow in the cities of Calgary and Edmonton against the white trash separatists. This is Indigenous land. It doesn't belong to the fucking white separatists. # Alberta separation. I mean, to be fair, I haven't like researched this in depth to find good like different examples, but yeah, you know, I'm sure there's lots of examples of this. And once again, you wouldn't think, oh well, hating Albertans as a group, that's not an identifiable group. Is it an identifiable group? You know, I feel like it could be, or it should be. But once again, this isn't to say that, hey, we're going to use Bill C-9. We're going to use Bill C-9 against people who are hating on conservatives or hating on Christians or hating on Albertans. No, that's not the point. The point is, like, if we grab these examples, more and more of these examples, stack them up and show them to the Senate to say, like, hey, guys, the Canadian government has clearly endorsed the willful promotion of hatred against identifiable groups. It's not in the legal term of identifiable groups, but it's still a group of people that you guys have obviously contributed to hating on. So where do you get off thinking that you should kind of embolden this legislation to actually criminalize this when you're guilty of it yourself? Obviously, this is the classic one. Toronto Star front page, unvaccinated. You know, to be fair, the Toronto Star did apologize for this. Come on, guys, here it is. Is this it? Yeah. This is front page of the Toronto Star on August 26, 2021. If an unvaccinated person catches it from someone who is vaccinated, boo-hoo, too bad. I have no empathy left for the willfully unvaccinated. Let them die. I honestly don't care if they die from COVID, not even a little bit. Unvaccinated patients do not deserve ICU beds. At this point, who cares? Stick the unvaccinated in a tent outside and tend to them when the staff has time. Man, this is a time I really try to forget, man. Jeez, was that a dark period? Oh my gosh. But yeah, so once again, that wouldn't catch though. Even though the unvaccinated, about 4 million Canadians, even though they're a minority, you could identify them with their vaccine status, I guess. Even though I don't like that idea of people being identified with vaccine status. Even though this is the case, you could identify them in a certain way. They are a minority. They are being detested and vilified by the mainstream media and by politicians. This actually wouldn't reach the threshold with BC9, with Bill C9, with how it would contribute to this, willfully promotion of hatred charge. So it's stupid. It's useless. Here's another good one. Charlie Kirk. No, what should the keywords be, guys? It should be left celebrates Charlie Kirk's death. Oh, man. Pure evil. Moments after Charlie Kirk was assassinated in broad daylight, radical leftists on TikTok began celebrating. Charlie was a son, a husband, and a father. His life was taken, and they're cheering. These are some of the people who preach love and tolerance. And I honestly think this might be, I think we would be getting warmer to like a really kind of clear-cut example. Because although this is in America, you can find examples of Canadian politicians probably. I'm pretty sure there was even like a city councillor in the Niagara region. I remember seeing this clip, and she was like, this city councillor basically said, I'm going to unfriend people who are sad about Charlie Kirk dying, was basically what she said. She was like, I am going to unfriend anybody who has sympathy for this person who died. And once again, like, legally, they can try to make the excuse and say, oh no, that's just an individual. That does not represent the average conservative Christian who supports Trump, even though it totally does. They're going to say that's not an identifiable group, even though it pretty well is. So we're allowed to hate that person. We're allowed to demonize and detest that person. Yeah. But once again, I mean, the point is, guys, maybe I haven't explained this yet. There is still an opportunity to stop C9. The Senate can still stop C9. I think they're taking like 2 weeks off, and then they're getting back to it to get into the second reading of C9 in the Senate. And I think there is still hope. I think that there is a chance to convince senators to stop this bill from passing. I think there is an appeal to the left that's possible, and I definitely think there's an appeal to the right. There is a lot of leftist senators, but I think the appeal could be compelling. And a lot of the frame so far is of the religious freedom exemption being taken away. And that's true, and that's really bad. And, you know, the potential for that being abused is obvious. But to me, it's missing the kind of bigger frame, like the more important way to look at it, which is people hate each other. People voice intense emotions to each other all the time. Let me bring up the actual definition of hatred that they want to codify into law with C9. The definition of hatred means an emotion of an intense and extreme nature that is clearly associated with vilification and detestation. So they want to criminalize this emotion of hatred, which is stupid for a number of reasons. This hasn't happened in Western countries pretty well ever under, in modern times, because people who are much smarter than I and much smarter than a lot of us have debated this, philosophized this over and over again, turning it over this way and that way. This was before TikTok. This was before social media. This was before OnlyFans, when people had nothing better to do than debate these ideas and talk about how to best run society. And they said, you know what? We should probably draw a line in the sand where only if you commit violence against somebody, only if you actually take an action that's unlawful, or if your speech goes into the realm of inciting violence, inciting an unlawful action, saying, hey, let's kill these people, or hey, let's genocide these people, or I'm going to kill you. Like these are the realms of speech that are a violation. An example when I was interviewing Bruce Party was, if I stop you in an alleyway and say, give me your wallet or else I'm going to kill you. That is speech that becomes criminal now because you're imposing on the other person's freedoms, right? But they drew this line in the sand on speech years and years and years ago by people much, much smarter than us. And now slowly but surely, they're starting to whittle away at that. They're starting to chip away at that with these different legal sleights of hands. And this is one of them. They're saying hate crime, hate crime, hate crime. Well, that's hatred, like feeling hatred or voicing hatred. And the threshold for hatred, vilification and detestation, I don't think that's very high. I detest and I think Justin Trudeau was a detestable villain in many ways. I think members of the Laurentian elite are detestable villains. Not all of them, but I don't know. It's a really, really, really bad precedent to set because it gets into the realm of feelings, gets into the realm of legislating feelings. So if somebody feels hatred towards another, or if somebody feels like they've been hated, then this becomes a problem, and then we're going to get dragged into the courts for the feelings. It's ridiculous. Here's one from Charlie Kirk. I wish the bullet that hit Charlie Kirk a very pleasant day. Very nice. Let's see. Canadian celebrates Charlie Kirk death. Let's see if anything comes up here. And I also got to talk about the man. This is a deep one. I'm gonna try to air this one out, but when you get called a fascist, when you get called a neo-Nazi, I would argue that that is vilifying somebody. I would say that that is willfully inciting hatred in hope that it leads to a breach of the peace. You've heard Jeremy Mackenzie and other far-right people explain this, but essentially it's like they don't care if you're a Nazi. They call you a Nazi because they want to commit violence against you. So ironically, like they're passing this bill to stop hatred, and they think they're going to go after all of these Nazis. But ironically, whenever they call us Nazis, that is them detesting and vilifying us. That is them breaking these so-called laws of willfully promoting hatred against a group or inciting hatred against a group. But again, they have this little caveat where the definition of identifiable group is there to try and save them, you know. But more and more, and one of the problems with this, obviously, is that I've been watching this. I watched this podcast with Rachel Gilmore talking to this anti-fascist, this guy who wrote a book, How to Catch an Anti-Fascist. And they don't care. They don't care about this definition of how they classify a fascist. And it's like they willfully do not give a shit of how they define who a fascist is or what a fascist is. So it's like this kind of just this definition, this daisy chain of anybody who's critical of immigration or doesn't fall in line. Well, now they're a fascist, or they associate with fascists, or you're just another neo-Nazi, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Hey, I see Wiretap just joined us. Wiretap, if you missed it, I was talking about how ironically, when you call somebody a Nazi, when you call somebody a fascist, this in many ways is the incitement of hatred that might lead to the breach of the peace. When you're calling someone a Nazi, or when you're calling someone a fascist, this is sort of, especially in regards to the left, this is like permission to now commit violence against this person. And this is not even really an exaggeration. Like, this is like their own words, like, you know, punch Nazis. And it's like, is it an actual Nazi, or is it someone who just got branded by a Nazi? Wherein the branding of the person of the Nazi, that is the vilifying of the person, which is going to lead to a breach of the peace. So, yeah, I've just been kind of swimming around in this stuff. Did you want to come up in chat, Wiretap, and kind of share your thoughts on C9? How do I even do this? Hold on. Oh my God, it's been a while since I've moderated. Oh, manage space. But yeah, all of this is to kind of, once again, kind of like boil down a strong argument that I think could be pitched to senators to help expose how absurd these laws are, and how it would just really create a clusterfuck of all sorts of legal cases that would be a total mess. How's it going, Wiretap? How are you?
Pretty good. How are you? I'm glad you're putting on this space because, you know, just the classification or how they've structured this Bill C9, and you know, this is about control. This is about political control. Like, and it's exactly what you're talking about. You know, calling somebody a Nazi, or, you know, like when they sit there and say the Dominion Society is white supremacy 3.0, and when they repackage the idea of ethnic cleansing and apply it to more modern political terms like remigration, this here is detestation and vilification, right? Like, they are literally vilifying, you know, a group of individuals that believe in anti-immigration, they believe in nationalism, and they believe in their country. And, you know, from another perspective, I know you mentioned in when you post this, you said like bring your examples of, well, pretty much anything that comes out of Barbara Perry's mouth, anyone from Anti-Hate, this falls into what you were talking about. But I'm going to take this a step further, and if this is based off of how I feel and who, like, my emotions, and well, then, you know what? All this post-nationalism rhetoric that Pierre Poilievre says, like, this is detestation in my mind. That's detestation to Canada, to our country. They are vilifying our country by using this post-nationalist rhetoric and spreading it out to the public instead of holding true to what a Canadian is. And I think, like, this is how broad we can make this, this C9. But the problem is it's going to be used and weaponized against people like us who have this idea of what Canada should be and what Canada is and always has been up until, the Trudeau regime opened the doors. I know that, like, the multiculturalism idea has been in the circle for a long time, but we haven't really felt the pain of it up until, the floodgates open. But I don't know. What do you think of that, Greg? Like, do you think that, like, being a nationalist, do you think that that meets your bar of detestation when you hear Pierre Poilievre say, we're a nation of immigrants?
Yeah. It's really interesting because, well, let me there's a lot to kind of get into here. It's a really good question. I think that is the result. I think we've seen that this is the kind of result of this post-nationalist thinking, this complete demonization of, anything to do with thinking Canada has a history that's worthy of celebrating or kind of honoring. These ideas do get vilified. They get vilified. They get equated to Hitler. Like, that's kind of what has been systemically happening for more or less decades, especially in the past 10 years. And as I was saying before, like when they call you a Nazi, when they call you a Hitler, when they call you a white supremacist, this is to demonize you. This is to vilify you. And all those ideas that you were saying of post-nationalism, anybody who disagrees with it is instantly a villain. So I do agree with you, but unfortunately, it's kind of like they are very clever with how they've kind of packaged all of this, because and I'll give you an example. Like, when I ran for the PPC way back in 2019, the news media wasn't saying the PPC is racist and they're horrible monsters. The Antifa was saying that on the internet, but like what the news says is they say, oh, there seems to be like there's evidence of a white supremacist at their rally, blah 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 blah. Like they do a slight like connect two dots. That's not them objectively or explicitly saying, hey, these guys are racist, or hey, these guys are white supremacists, but they make the strong connection and there's a strong implication of, oh, these are bad guys. These are not, like, that's the implication. And I witnessed this like it was very visceral, very vivid for me, because, I saw some of the news reports and I'm like, oh, well, that's bullshit. Like, who would believe that? But then I would go on the ground door to door, like campaigning for the PPC, and people would freak the fuck out and get so hostile and like actually start freaking out and shouting at me, calling me a fascist, shouting at me, calling me a racist. This was way back in 2019. And people would have like such a visceral reaction from just learning, oh, PPC, like, you're literally a Nazi, you're literally a fascist. So that is the effect. You are correct. That is the effect as this happens, but it's like they do a good job of sort of insulating themselves from explicitly saying things like that out loud. But maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, because if you turn the tables, think about a good example. This is not turning the tables necessarily. Well, what's a more direct example? Oh, they say when we want remigration, when we want to enforce our immigration law, when we want to deport people who legally should be deported. Hey, we want to enforce the law, gets turned into, oh, so you want to ethnically cleanse people and you hate all these people, right? So they are able to jump to this conclusion of saying, haha, like you made this implication, which means you hate all these people. But whenever they make the implication of like, hey, I think all these people are racist or whatever, they're able to kind of get away with this this implication. I kind of got lost a little bit there, but
yeah, no, I know what you mean, and I know what you mean about the connections, because I think that a good example of that connection that you're talking about is the idea of remigration being ethnic cleansing, right? Like Evan Balgore does this often when he does these podcasts and stuff, is he says, well, experts say that this is a new form of ethnic cleansing, when ethnic cleansing has a clear definition and remigration is not ethnic cleansing, right? So they're repackaging that idea, and they're trying to subvert these political narratives or this messaging that like Dominion Society's creating, or like maybe some of these anti-immigration groups or active clubs are trying to build momentum with these ideas. So then they try to kind of build these connections in areas where it vilifies the individuals, not outright, but like people are so simplistic that they make that connection in their own mind. Is that kind of what I think that's, that kind of says what you were talking about, or kind of aligns with that.
Yeah. And I think something that'll help us kind of get further into this topic. I think it just comes down to, honestly, like what the mainstream narrative is. What is the cultural and social conditioning that the public has received so far? Like, we could even just zoom in on the convoy as an example. On one hand, you have concerned Canadians who oppose vaccine mandates. They're standing up for bodily autonomy. But when you turn on the TV, you have these people are neo-Nazis who want to overthrow the government and are trying to kill us all. Like, you have two completely different stories, and the one that's vilifying, concerned Canadian citizens is the more popular one. And let's compare that to something that Juno News just dropped today. I think it was today. Exclusive: media ignores far left fight club embracing political violence. Did you see this one?
Yeah, I actually I've been holding on to that. I saw that about a week ago. We were working on trying to get somebody to go to the event, but they're heavily vetting. Yeah, so it's like an undisclosed area. Basically everything Evan Balgore accuses, like, these active clubs of doing, like they're doing. And,
yeah.
It's sickening. It really is. And like, but there's more to this story. And like, we're working on something on the back end. You and I could talk about that privately. But like, this is crazy. This stuff that they kind of, what they do, it's so gross. Like it's listening to Evan speak is like listening to him gaslight you for like an hour. It's like that's what it's like. I feel like I'm in this like psychological mind fuck, and like this little creature is just like trying to brainwash me into believing these things are happening when he's like actually behind it. and it's pretty crazy. I don't know. It's quite scary, actually.
It's I identify with what you're saying, and bro, you gotta stop watching so much Evan Balgord clips. It's you can only watch so much at a time before you have to, like, okay, I gotta go for a walk. I gotta just doom scroll, or like I gotta like watch a TV show or something and get this toxicity. Because you know it's like I have you ever heard of the phrase, like, when you stare into the abyss, it stares back? That's like in reference. I forget what that's in reference to, but it's like staring into like the deep dark abyss of like where the demons are, and like the demons are like staring back at you, and like when they stare back at you, they can, like, they can infect your soul. It's quite scary. So don't watch too much Evan Balgord clips. I watched most of the podcast between Rachel Gilmore and the guy who wrote the book To Catch a Fascist. Oh my gosh, I needed to like shower, pray 3 Hail Marys after that. I'm like, geez Louise, this feels gross hearing these people speak.
Yeah.
But
that one I didn't jump into.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to do some reporting on that, because they've revealed, hey, this is what fascists believe. This is what fascists do. And it's like, okay, so you support political violence. You don't care about identifying who is and who is not a fascist. You're associated with, it's mostly communists and socialists. And so it's like, okay, so you don't care about the atrocities that communism has caused in the past. You don't care about that. You want to commit political violence. Like, okay.
And again, it's how they frame it. It's how they frame it too. Like, they call it preemptive violence or preemptive assault, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which means like this, and this comes from Dr. Antifa's book on anti-fascism, right? That Dr. Mark Bray or whatever his name is. And it's like, basically they take this position where they have to assault you because of the harm you are going to create as a fascist to society warrants them assaulting you. So it's like preemptive assault. So they see it as almost like self-defense. That's the way they're calling it, self-defense.
Well, and this is the
crazy.
thing. This is the thing. It would be fine if it was like an equal treatment of both. But this kind of like leftist fight club is a great example of how, if leftists want to try to, learn how to not punch like a girl, like, good on them. That's fine. Hey, they're preparing for violence. Like, that's kind of understandable. Shit's getting heated. But at the same time, you have the CBC putting thousands of dollars into reports of the same thing on the right wing, which is people preparing for violence, people learning how to throw a punch, and they completely demonize Second Sons. And it's like, okay, so our institution is totally biased, obviously. They're only going to look at a fight club on the right wing. They're not going to give a shit at all about the left wing. They're going to say one is like a little spooky boogeyman. They're going to vilify this group. Well, they're going to completely ignore the exact same thing on the opposite side of the spectrum. So, and yeah, this is why, again, like, there's a lot of problems with C9, but the most kind of absurd thing about all of this is, like, look, there's a lot of different, you got Sikhs versus Hindus, you got Jews versus Muslims, you got, the native Canadian population versus immigrants who are moving in. You got, the left versus right, people who think it was great that Charlie Kirk got shot, and, Christians who are mourning over it. And you got transgenders, trans kids versus concerned parents. Like, all these different factions are obviously going to express intense emotions that could border or cross into the realm of criminal hate based on this definition. And it's like, do you, the government, really want the responsibility, really think you even have the sort of discernment to decide which hate is too far and which hate is okay? And moreover, I feel like this is a really strong point that I want to present to senators. This definition of identifiable group is so outdated. It's so outdated. I'll read it again. Identifiable group means any section of the public distinguished by color, race, religion, national or ethnic origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, or mental or physical disability. You know, there's nothing in there about political belief. There's nothing in there about political alignment, because that was 50 years ago. Today, when you see the polarized political climate we're in, if you were serious about wanting to, like, if you were serious about wanting equality and wanting to stop hate between different groups and have everybody get along, you would clearly have that in part of the definition of identifiable group. And I think, again, if you were serious about wanting to make sure society goes well, you would recognize what happened 4 years ago in the middle of the pandemic when unvaccinated people or people who opposed the mandates were vilified by the actual institutions of this country, the mass media, the politicians, and many, many other people all over the place detested and vilified this group of people, this minority. So it's like, you know, if you're serious about actually stopping the hate, then actually address what's happened in recent history and accommodate the laws for that. That being said, I don't think we should be passing C9 and trying to, like, you know, fix it. I totally reject this idea. I'm just presenting these arguments because, you know, I want to air out all these arguments to find how to best expose how absurd this is, that we think that we're going to be able to police hate in the country without it being a huge clusterfuck of, you know, different political factions wanting to fine and sue each other. I think I might bring some more people up here, but tell me what's going on. What were we going to say?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The bill has to be scrapped in its entirety, right? Even the section where it says that you know, the Crown prosecutor isn't going to set the bar anymore, or is not going to determine what the threshold is, and police can just carry out these charges without it being reviewed. Like, this is so dangerous, because Bernie Farber himself admitted in testimony in the House of Commons that a gentleman who was sending out this, what he called an anti-Semitic flyer throughout Toronto, right? He actually, like, kept on harassing the police until, and his local jurisdiction wouldn't press charges, but he had a friend in another department, and that friend pressed charges for him. And he admitted this all in special committee. So when we're sitting there thinking, like, what's to stop some rich guy from, like, you know, we see all this police corruption, all these cops are getting arrested, you know, it's just corruption has swept across the country. What's stopping some rich guy from kicking over a bag of cash to a cop and saying, hey, you know what, let's just use lawfare on this guy. We need to shut him up.
And this is the thing, like, I don't know if this is the best argument for senators necessarily, but I think it should be in there, because it's like, this could so easily be abused. And once again, with what we saw during the convoy, it didn't really look like a democratic government of a, you know, Western country. It looked like an authoritarian regime who was like, you know, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Like, that's what it looked like. And I'm bringing up on stream here too, the Nazi flag that happened to show up the very first day of the convoy, that people have a theory that maybe this flag was staged or planted there. And this is kind of another part of Bill C9, which is the criminalization of symbols, the Nazi symbol being one of them. And it's like, in the future, if there's any protest movement that's gaining steam and opponents of this protest movement want to discredit and criminalize the entire protest movement, they can just hire somebody to show up with a Nazi flag. Boom. You know, like, everybody now associated with this protest is now going to, potentially, you know, catch hate charges, or is it just the person holding the flag? Like, there's so many, like, to criminalize symbols like that. The ways it could be used and abused are just, like, insane. Like, this idea that stop like criminalizing a symbol is going to like stop hatred is just really 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 dumb, and it's really
Doesn't it
stupid.
say a variation of those symbols too?
Yeah. There's dude. So I
That
I was streaming this the other night because it really is absurd. Let's see if I can bring it up. Do I have it here? That's 319. Okay, let me just bring it up in a sec. But essentially, I might be able to do it by memory. When it comes to, and we'll get to you in a second, Nathan. When it comes to Bill C9 and the symbols, any group that's on the like terrorist entity list and their associated symbols. And the thing is, one of the groups on that list is the Proud Boys. And one of their symbols is like a certain polo t-shirt that was like associated with this group. And at one point, like, you know, Donald Trump was like wearing this like polo t-shirt that was associated with the Proud Boys, which kind of, you know, based on the legislation, here, I'll bring it up right now. Here we go. I'll read it. One sec. So this is part of C9. It's a new charge, willful promotion of hatred, terrorism, and hate symbols. Everyone commits an offense who willfully promotes hatred against any identifiable group by displaying, this is the crime, displaying in any public place a symbol that is principally used by or principally associated with a listed entity. And the listed entity is like, you know, people on the terrorist watch list. And then also it says a symbol that so nearly resembles a symbol described in this, or that is likely to be a symbol described like that. And then they add the Nazi lightning bolts and the Nazi swastika or whatever.
and that's and why that's bad is because that's like those black blotch flashcards that you put in front of a psychopath and then you put in front of a regular person, and a psychopath is going to see a bat and a other person's going to see a cat. Like that, and it's just like the FedEx logo, right? A lot of people don't see the arrow in between the E and the X, right? And like some people see it. So it's like everyone's going to view something differently. So like people are going to make these connections to things that just, you know what I mean? It's crazy. It's fucking crazy, man.
And well, how about this? How about, once again, there's a protest movement that the Canadian government doesn't like, and they're doing this big demonstration. And, or maybe it's not that the government doesn't like, maybe it's some opposing group doesn't like this protest movement. And then the opposing group gets infiltrators, prints out a whole bunch of stickers of like Nazi symbols, and then starts slapping the stickers on all sorts of people's backpacks and like, you know, kind of just like putting them on stuff. Like, you know, they infiltrate and just like start slapping these like hateful symbols everywhere that are literally criminal. How would you even deal with that as a legislator? How, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, and the thing is like, it's a mess. It'd be a mess.
Yeah, you'll have Antifa like they'll, you know, crusader flags out, anything to like make Christianity more abolished than it is, you know, with the burning of the churches and everything. It's just, I get what you're saying. It would feel like it will work against us. Like it sounds good, like the hijab, the Muslim bullshit, and all that. At the end of the day, it probably mostly be used against Christianity, like the founding religion of our country. But like you're touching on that bill
100%.
there. How you doing, Mr. Wyclef and Wire?
I'm doing good,
Wiretap
Nathan.
Warriors
How
this
are
evening?
you, sir? How are you? I'm doing great,
Good,
thank you.
buddy. Good, buddy. I'm staying alive, you know, and I'm just waiting for the famine, you know, with the shortages of fuel and all that. Like, it's mostly happening in the third world countries, but yeah, you can expect the famine's going to happen with the fertilizer and growing season coming. Like, we're going to see a famine for sure. But we're on the bills here. I just listen to you guys. Yeah, you know, it's just more bills being passed to to keep us from being critical against the government at the end of the day, like C8, right? That in the fine print of that, that they essentially have the power to disconnect us from the internet. Defining, and now what, C22, allowing them to collect our data for what, up to a year, guys? Metadata up to a year. So pulling
3 years if they believe it's serious.
Right. So there's data they can span through and say, yeah, let's call that hate. And with Bill C8, he's a little extreme. He's speaking out against the regime. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and what is that? That is everything. I don't like the amount of migrants coming in. Well, who's writing those policies? The government. So what are you essentially speaking out against? The government. So like, let's shut him off. Let's disconnect his fucking Wi-Fi and his cell phone connection. And we have metadata for a year to back him from his posts on X. You know, like he's speaking, like it's so fucking warped. And now this religious shit, like you guys are talking about right now, how that can be just aligned against Christianity and how that aligns with mostly white people in the country. Like it's it all just revolves around being critical against government and just silencing us against speaking against what is essentially controlling us, right? At the end of the day, right? Would you agree, guys?
Yeah, and that like that metadata, that's not just like your comments, that's your private messaging too. That's even your private correspondence, right? Like
literally anything you do in your phone.
Yeah, so they can build a case on you and then turn around, utilize all of the tools that are in C9 and, you know, C63 and, you know, C12 and all these, you know, totalitarian bills that they're just shoveling down our throats. They can just line up this massive list of charges. So like you're facing this lawfare and you have to take a plea deal because like it'll cost you like $5 million to defend yourself. And that's where we're headed. And the fact that we don't have a true opposition or people that are fighting against it. Like, I think it was either, I think I saw this in Greg's live stream. You guys should go watch his, if anyone here hasn't watched his live stream on the breakdown of this bill, like I highly recommend it because
no, like, I watch Greg. Greg, you put up good streams, buddy. You in Dominion side, you guys are awakening a lot of people, especially in the East Coast as well. Like, they're putting out a good message, you know. And
thank you.
Where it doesn't look so extreme, you know, like, because they want everything, you know, labeled racist extreme right away and all that. Like, you're actually putting out the message properly, where you're just laying out the facts, and it's undeniable, right? And that's what has to be done. You know, you can't blame people. You just got to line it to where it is all the government that's doing this, right? At the end of the day,
no, absolutely. I do want to ask you a quick. Well, I'll ask you now. I'm gonna talk about something I just found on Grok. That's wild. Swastika hockey teams. I haven't heard about this little tidbit of Canadian history.
1921 or 22. Yeah,
dude, apparently there was multiple teams. Yeah, a women's hockey team. So I asked Grok,
awesome.
Was the Edmonton, Alberta Swastikas a real hockey team? When were they around? Yes, the Edmonton Swastikas were a real women's hockey team from Edmonton, Alberta. They were active in 1916. It was an amateur women's team from the early days of organized women's hockey in Canada, when the swastika was still widely used as a good luck or decorative symbol in many cultures and had no connection to the Nazis. A well-known team photo from 1916 shows the players in sweaters wearing... It's so crazy because it's like, wait, is this AI or is this real? And there's also the Windsor Swastikas, which was a men's team in 1905 to 1916, and then the Fernie Swastikas, which is another women's team in BC.
The symbol meant like welcome in so many aspects of like so many cultures, or you know, it was a welcoming symbol, or it was a peaceful symbol in so many. You know, right. Posty actually played on the team. She's 123, I think. I believe Posty, or 123.
Is that
she actually
right?
played on that team.
Oh my gosh! And that's the thing. That's like, is that really a hate symbol? That's just part of our heritage. That's just.
Well, you know, like if you look that symbol up, it that symbol, Greg, aligns with so many cultures and like the what it actually means, and like
Mm-hmm.
that was a on welcome mats, like the word said milk. You go walking into our house, like a welcome mat, like that was a symbol for welcome and to my knowledge in certain cultures and peace. So yeah, it's and it
But
was in
Nate,
many cultures, like the like.
but Nathan, I want to ask you. I want to ask you while you're here, because the whole point of this kind of stream and this discussion tonight, because there's a lot of things we can get into in C9, but I kind of want to try to keep it focused here. You know, do you think there's any identifiable groups that have been vilified or detested by the Canadian government, Canadian institutions, you know, the academia, anything like that? Or like in your experience? And who would it be?
Well, I would.
Why?
Yeah. Well, not my personal experience being a bit older, but I would say being a youth now growing up in Canada, the incentives that go to everyone but Canadians, I would say would be the actual, blood and soil Canadian that experiences the most oppression and discrimination towards actual funding and you name it, like the wage subsidies. Like a youth now is growing up competing with every aspect of their life, like getting into school. They cater. Universities are treated as a business. The highest bidder gets to go in, and it's usually foreign students. And getting a job, well, you're competing with wage subsidies. Getting a house, you're competing with the mass amount of migration that comes in, and it's competing with that roof over your head with the lack of housing being built since the pandemic. So I
Can
would
you
say
can you think of
the ethnic
specific?
Canadian.
Can you think of specific examples, like things that have kind of like whizzed by your timeline? Whether it was like a policy decision or a specific like, because I know they've done things where they're like, hey, we're going to have the Black Entrepreneurial Program where we're going to,
Yeah, the two.
you
What
know,
is that? What is that, Greg? That's like a 250K Black-owned business fund for them to just start a business and just because they're Black. Like we have that in our country. I think that's yeah. I think you nailed one right there. Black-owned business entrepreneurship program or
the
fund
other
to start a business.
the other example would be,
Uh,
I think there's a lot of examples of the CBC and their sort of hiring policies, or
yeah,
the who else? Like, different universities. There was this one guy who's like
yeah,
been
yeah.
kind of posting a lot of like different job postings for universities, and a whole bunch of them are like describing, we're looking for a Black lesbian in a wheelchair for a rocket scientist position, and they don't say no whites, but it's like it's kind of the implication
It's
sometimes.
it's yeah. It's just without saying it. Yeah.
Being
Uh,
called a anti-vaxxer now is technically hate speech too.
mm,
What do
I,
you?
I I would say yeah, the university thing, like like if you look at like you walk in your universities now, guys, like it's brown people, it's all Asians and brown people across the country, like and they're paying more to go there because it's like I said, it's treated as a business. They're not
Mhm.
focused on local students. They don't give a shit about us, right? As it should be. But they're treating that as a business and not actual for purposes of educationing for our people. So
Mhm.
yeah, education for sure. Like we see the memes like in Ireland, we see them here. The one white student like and there's filled with Koreans and Chinese, and like uh, you know, yeah, they all said it was a conspiracy. That's the caption on the meme. Um, yeah, it's quite apparent, especially in our country. I mean, we're the most multicultural country in the world, especially where I think you're from, Greg, and Ontario, and you guys are Ontario. It's what 250 ethnicities in Toronto alone. I mean, I'm in Cape Breton, right? Like it's still 95% white. It's not so apparent. Yeah, Walmart, Tim Hortons. They're starting to take over the cab companies, somewhat the trucking, and sure enough, they'll take community and they'll vote themselves in because 12 of them will live in one house and you think it's a small community but there's enough to put one of themselves in politically and then they'll take the next community and the domino effect, like we get what they do. There's
Here's here's like a perspective as well where again I'm trying to like find examples where it's like, oh, there we go, there's an example of a Canadian politician or someone in an institution in the media clearly promoting hatred, detestation, or vilification against like Canadians. And I'm thinking, like, I brought this up earlier, but Albertans, you know, there's been many memes online where people go like, oh, Albertans, like those people are just like racist or whatever. Or like, oh, Alberta is like totally backwards, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, being able to find a clip in the House of Commons of like some liberal MP saying that, of being like, oh, well, you know, like what the hell was that? What comment, what is the implication of a comment like this? Again, it's or like maybe is there some East Coast examples of do you guys infight? Do you guys infight over there or what?
Not so much, man. We're kind of, you know, everyone still kind of knows their neighbors, still kind of same community sense. Like the doors are still unlocked as of today. I don't lock the doors, and I know all the neighbors around me and stuff, which is great.
Well, now you're gonna have a flood of Indians coming in and doing fucking home invasion.
No, they're safe.
We're a little
They're safe on the
different here.
island, bro. They're safe on the island. It's good
Yeah,
at
we're,
Cape Breton.
we're a little different here, and you know, kind of people make them feel like uncomfortable, where they want to maybe stay here for a bit, and like, yeah, we're gonna leave. You guys are a little different, but the Alberta thing, like I'm, you know, I worked out in Alberta for ages. I loved it. Worked in the infrastructure in the oil and gas industry for 15 years. But what I will say, I did kind of like troll that a little bit with like the whole separation, with that meme that was going around with the one white guy with the, you know, the bags in his eyes, and he's surrounded by nuns. And I changed that to like, we Albertans are separating from Canada, and it's all, you know, nuns, because like if you're essentially, you know, what is Edmonton and Calgary now? It's filled with fucking like the south, the northeast of, I'm trying to remember, northeast of Calgary or southeast of Calgary. It was all fucking east. It was India, you know, and Edmonton. So what are you separating with? Like, we're going to separate, but you're separating with, you're essentially non-Canadians, right? You're going to separate it with like with India and everything we've imported. Like, there's a lot of logic there that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I get it, like the unfair, like the equalization, like all that shit. I get all that, but at the end of the day, who are you separating with? Like what? Like you're flooded too. You know, at the end of the day, and you're dealing with the same problems every other province is, and we don't want to. We want to separate from those people, not Canadians, but to make a point and have, you know, you want to stand tall at the same time. I get that. But that just, there's just so many ifs and what ifs and what the hell, unanswered questions there, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, Greg,
yep.
One example is Mark Miller's own example for implementing Bill C-9, like when he talked about religion being hateful. Or, you know what I mean? Like that there meets his own, like it's like ironically it's like his argument was a conundrum, right? It was just like he was just piling shit on top of shit. So yeah, that's
interesting.
You know, so you know, and the fact that nobody, you know, from the conservative side pointed that out, that he just, you know, engaged in detestation and vilification of a certain group, in this case Christians, is pretty crazy.
Yeah. And on that note, I actually have a list that I'm just going to fire off here when it comes to the vilification of Christians. I mean, mind you, this is from AI, but this is a pretty good, this is a decent summary of things that have happened. Since the church burnings, there was this understandable vilification of Christians, where in July 2nd, 2021, Trudeau stated publicly, "I understand the anger that's out there against the federal government, against institutions like the Catholic Church. It is real and it's fully understandable." It's fully understandable. This is after churches were burned to the ground. It's fully understandable given the shameful history that we are all becoming more and more aware of. This was said during a period when at least 85 Catholic churches had been set ablaze or vandalized with graffiti, including, quote, colonizers, killers, and if you hurt and or kill kids, you should be burned alive. So there's the sort of like...
Greg.
Yep.
Oh, that's what I just wanted. What you just said right there, buddy. That's what I wanted to touch on. What the interesting percentage would be is how many of them churches burnt down when they created the hoax of the mass graves. Because I think probably 75% of that happened during that period, right? When and then
Yep.
they got the handouts, and then the Pope coming over, the 30 million to have him watch these people dance and cry and dress up like Halloween. So I would say, because that's I know here, I think I'm not sure, guys, but I think like 100 churches burned down. I could be wrong. I think a
Yeah,
hundred
I think
churches.
it's
We have
I
a
think it's I think
fucking
it's
lot of churches.
I think it's around 130 that the count is since the mass graves thing was promoted.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're making me think though, like the laws that they're going to try to embolden and use is the willful incitement of hatred that would lead to a breach of the peace, and the willful promotion of hatred. And it's interesting because, as you said, they did this thing at public schools where it was almost like this ritualistic promotion, or like vilification and detestation. This sort of like what's the word? Atrocity propaganda that results in totally vilifying a group of people. And yeah, actually, here's another. Yeah, go ahead.
And to escalate, oh, sorry, Greg, to escalate UNDRIP. Um,
Yep.
what is UNDRIP again?
United Nations something
Declaration
something.
of United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights or something. To escalate that, because that is a legit thing. Like, they were actually giving things back. Like, they're putting land claims in here left and right. Like, these companies and businesses that were there for years, the Indigenous have put in a land claim, and Trudeau gave 150 million to Waikagama, to a population of a little reserve, like that was part of this reserve. They gave him 150 million dollars. Just because, like, they put in a land claim, say this is actually ours too, and the Royal Bank was on it. It was in the city, kinda. You know what I mean? Like, shit like that. And like, this is a legit thing. That UNDRIP is it holds no weight. It's just the government gives that power, right? But it is all like, it's all fine printed, like all the treaties. Like, it means this, it means that. It's not quite defined, like the fishery. Like, it's not, nothing's defined. Like a moderate livelihood. Well, what is that? They didn't define it, so they're going and catching 10,000 pounds a day out of season because we didn't define it. Like, it's just like they'll just do whatever they want. And at the end of the day, it's worded to benefit them. But this UNDRIP is no joke. Like, it's all about giving everything back to these people, and it is happening in an alarming, like, it's happening at an alarming rate, man. Like,
It's an easier way for corporate companies to buy it. People don't.
Yeah.
yeah, well, absolutely.
I don't think it's actually to help Indigenous people at all. I think that they've weaponized this Indigenous causes to sort of disenfranchise other groups, or to kind of consolidate power in different ways. But let's stay on focus. Let's stay on topic here. We're not about you.
Yeah, I want to. You mentioned that. You mentioned something about like if the speech creates some sort of civil unrest, or what did you say the bill states there, Greg?
Yes.
Something to do with like public unrest.
This is C9, right? You guys are talking C9.
Yeah,
like the new, like,
I'm trying to make that clear.
Yeah, sure. So, and just to be clear, these are actually hate speech or hatred bills that have actually been on the books for 50 years, but they've hardly ever actually been used because, I'm guessing it's hard to persecute. The problem is C9 is going to make it easier to persecute people with this legislation. But how it reads is, everyone who, by communicating statements in any public place, that includes online, incites hatred against any identifiable group where such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace, is guilty for up to 2 years
likely. Okay, so
this
first of all, likely.
I have that highlighted in red because that is really like vague language. Who's going to determine that? And the example of what we just
is-
talked about, like inciting hatred against any identifiable group, promoting the mass graves and the horrible, residential schools, which was done by our institutions, by the mainstream media, done in like local schools by the actual school boards. This clearly incited hatred against Christians, which led to the burning of churches, which I'm sure is considered a breach of the peace. So there's an example of...
Which doesn't align to the narrative, though.
Well,
but you're
hold on.
100%
Actually, hold on,
correct.
hold on. Maybe that's the kind of gotcha to show
Yeah.
the Canadian Senate, which is like,
Yeah.
even if we assume all of this is true, you said it's understandable. So in this case, you're saying that breaking the law and inciting hatred against Christians that led to the burning of churches, you're basically saying this is a good thing. But you're not going to get charged because you're the government. But it's like, this is something that you have done, that you participated in.
But if you say the opposite of what Carney says, Muslim values don't align with Canadians, then what are you saying here? Oh, well, fuck Muslims. Well, you're inciting hate. Anything other than Christianity or something that an ethnic Canadian would represent would be basically defined as hate. Because, at the end of the day, like diversity, multicultural, they're anti-white terms, right? Because those terms are basically, essentially, extinct us as a people, as a culture, as an ethnicity, as a way of life. Like that's what they are. Like, because we don't impose that in any other. That we're the only nations, Western Europeans, that these terms are being used on and imposed on the ideologies. And we need to be more diverse. We need more. But they're anti-white at the end of the day. Like that's what.
Yeah, no, I think
diversity means.
I think what you're trying to say, and this is something that we, obviously at Dominion Society, we're acutely aware of. When Africans, when Somalians, when Indians, when they're on CBC, when the Indigenous, when they're talking about our people and our culture, it's so important. Like, we need to promote it. We need to make sure it's sustained into the future. The CBC host is just gushing. Like there's a puddle on the floor. They're like, oh my God, you're so right. Your culture is so important. We need to honor it. It is such a beautiful thing. Oh my God, this is the most loving, amazing thing ever. And then if a white Canadian says, hey, our culture is great. We need to honor it. We need to celebrate it. We need to protect it into the future, specifically, the Canadian roots of this country and who built the country. Then that's not okay. That's what do they call that? They call that ethnic cleansing. They call this white supremacy. And then they start to willfully promote hatred against people who say this. An identifiable group, you could say, the blood and soil Canadians, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, and that's why this topic is. I want to just reiterate a point in case people haven't heard it. This is why this is such a conundrum, because anytime you accuse someone of fascism, anytime you accuse somebody of being, a racist or a white supremacist or one of these things, you are actually vilifying this person. Like that's what that is. You are vilifying the person, which is, in turn, violating one of these laws, or at least is encroaching in this part of the law. And I think all of this should be legal. I think you should be able to willfully promote hatred. I think you should be able to definitely willfully promote hatred. The problem with the public incitement of hatred is that they're actually doing this fucked up sleight of hand with their legalese, where they're saying that inciting in an emotion of hatred is supposed to be illegal. So an example would be if I said, man, look at all these scamming Indian truck drivers who are killing people on the roads and the standards are going down. They could say, or like what I say there could incite hatred against an identifiable group, Indians. And if they say what I say is like extreme enough, they could say, well, that's likely to lead to a breach of the peace, because the way that you talked about Indians being scammers was so extreme. It was such an intense testimony that we think it's going to lead to a breach of the peace. So, like, again, like this stuff shouldn't be illegal. It's ridiculous. And sorry,
that's applied to the algorithms.
Just to clarify my point, though, incitement is supposed to be an unlawful action. If you look at the history of the word, the meaning of the word incitement, it's inciting violence. It's inciting a riot. It's inciting an actual unlawful action. As in like, hey guys, let's storm the Capitol. Hey guys, let's throw rocks at them. Hey guy, like that's the incitement part where you said something that was like telling people or encouraging people to commit a crime. That's what incitement means. Here they're saying inciting a feeling. If you incite an emotion, if you say something that makes someone feel like they want to throw a rock or something, and it's like, it's not the person speaking, it's not the responsibility of the person hearing your message to like, you know, it's the person speaking, it's not my responsibility to know how people are going to respond to what I say and what they're going to do after that. And like, that's the real problem. And it's crazy because this law is 50 years old. But then again, there's a reason why it hasn't been enforced that many times because, you know, it's such a mess.
Hey, Greg, I sent you a Supreme Court ruling that Eva Chepniak posted earlier today. I sent it to you via private message. You should read it because I think you know, if we're talking historical fact and we're talking about legal precedent, I think that these like any sort of charge under C9 could be challenged.
What specifically in this do you think is like the most compelling?
The post I sent you?
Yeah. It's just, you know, it's kind of long.
I think the point, I'll have to, give me a quick sec here. I think the point that she points out here at the beginning when she says that the right of people to discuss and debate ideas forms the very foundation of democracy. For this reason, the Supreme Court of Canada has protected the right of each citizen to participate in political debate. And then
permitting an effective voice for unpopular and minority views political parties may not embrace is essential to deliberative democracy. The goal should be to bring the views of all citizens into the political arena for consideration, be they accepted or rejected at the end of the day. Free speech in the public square may not be curtailed merely because one might find the message unappetizing for the messenger distasteful. Yeah, the ability to engage in effective speech in the public square means nothing if it does not include the ability to attempt to persuade one's fellow citizens through debate and discussion. This is the kernel from which reasoned political discourse emerges. Freedom of expression must allow a citizen to give voice to her vision for her community and nation, to advocate change through the art of persuasion in the hope of improving her life and indeed the larger social, political, and economic landscape. Freedom of expression protects not only the individual who speaks the message, but also the recipient. Members of the public, as viewers, listeners, and readers, have a right to information on public governance, absent which they cannot cast an informed vote. So I think the most useful thing there is to say freedom of expression to advocate change through the art of persuasion. This is going to include intense emotion at times. You know, you're not always going to be, I am monotone. I care about Canada. I think that we need immigration reform. Hey, look at these statistics over here. Like, no, you're going to be emotive. You're going to get passionate. You're going to, you know, fight for what you think is right. And as Justin Trudeau said, the anger is understandable. The anger is understandable after the church is burned down. So if Justin Trudeau can say the anger is understandable, do I not have the right to get angry at a specific person, potentially at a specific group? And that's what I think, like, you know, emphasizing the messiness of free expression is kind of what needs to be emphasized here. You know, like, because meanwhile, you have these politicians who are like, we need to stop hate. Like, this is the most Orwellian shit, the most inhuman stuff to say that you're going to police emotion. Like, that's the frame that I feel like not enough people in the Conservative Party chose. they did a decent job, but it's unfortunate because it really is like such a fundamental Western value, like Western civilizational thing that I don't know. Definitely doesn't get talked about in the mainstream. Like people are so primed for this stuff with all the talk about like wanting to stop hate and all this nonsense. But yeah, no, there might be something in there. That's something I heard in terms of trying to persuade a senator, trying to find as many kind of like constitutional receipts as you can in terms of things that have been written about like in the official kind of legalese of Canadian history. So there might be something here.
Yeah, but even so, bad ideas you have to be able to express even the worst ideas, right? Because you don't come to a consensus without everything on the table. And when you say something like what you brought up before, like so these Indian truckers are committing fraud and killing people on Canadian roads, which are all true, right? But because you said Indian truckers, you are now promoting hate, or you're engaging in vilification or detestation of a certain group, when the reality is it's the vast majority of these people committing these fraudulent acts, getting behind a vehicle or the wheel of a vehicle they have no experience with.
Yeah. Who is insuring these people, and who is authorizing these people to have a license? Sorry to, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is going on?
We're trying to keep it on topic here, Nathan. Let's keep it on topic here, Nathan.
Yeah,
I appreciate
but he's
it.
on the CDL thing. The CDL thing, like it says, like who is actually fucking having the balls to insure this, and who is,
it's all being done. It's all being done overseas through corporate companies, like corporate shell companies. It's very difficult for them to track. But I'm going to get back on topic. So, if we look at that as an example, right, we are now eliminating the ability to track statistics, to even prevent these sort of things from happening, like by suppressing those thoughts on the basis, by suppressing the people's ability to speak freely about those sorts of things, prevents us from identifying real world problems and societal problems. Would you not agree? Like we can't identify specific problems in society without specifically targeting certain groups. If we're a multicultural nation, like they're trying to tell us we are, we cannot identify the problems that are impacting our country if we do not identify the people behind the problems.
Well,
if we identify those people outright, like you gave an example of before, it now falls under hate, right? It falls under vilification, detestation.
And you know what's actually really ironic about what you're saying? I agree with you. And it's like the ruling class doesn't want us to ever do that. They're like, hey, citizens, you all need to get along. You shouldn't stereotype each other. You shouldn't generalize one another. But then what does the ruling class do? Or what do these different political parties do? All liberals are communists. All conservatives are racist. Everybody who's in Russia are evil. Putin is horrible. Russians are shit. We're going to bomb the fuck out of them. Like that's exactly what leaders do. They generalize. That's like their greatest weapon, is like creating fear and animosity, detesting and vilifying their political enemies. Like that. This is their like MO basically. Maybe that's actually a good.
You colonizers.
Are you guys? Look, guys. Look, you were a fan of Mackenzie King, right? One of their greatest prime ministers. Both of you. You would say, like, yeah, he was fucking pretty based. It was awesome.
It's embarrassing to say, but like I don't know nearly enough about our Canadian history and prime ministers.
Okay, well, Mackenzie King was like, he was the best prime minister. He was the longest serving prime minister of Canada, 21 years for a reason, right? And he wanted to maintain the English, Scottish, Irish, French. Um, the Red Ensign. He wanted that to be Canada. He opposed the war in Germany because he knew it would lead to mass migration. If you really look into him, he was a notch above, McDonald, in my opinion. He was longest prime minister for a reason anyway. And he was a liberal, right? But a liberal that would have hung conservatives today for being too liberal. Do you get me? So like liberalism meant a different thing back then. And I'm sure, guys, your parents or possibly your grandparents voted liberal. And, boomers, they were raised by a television that told them what to do. And they voted not based on policy. They voted because my father was a liberal. I'm going to vote liberal, right? Not realizing that link and transition where it turned into socialism, into communism, like the combustion of both at the same time in that engine, right? So that's where like that link is missed. And you can't tell them nothing because they're so dull in the head. Like that's where things got a little lost because it didn't mean what it once meant and what it once was. Like I said, like Mackenzie King 100% would have hung conservatives today. Conservatives, a liberal government would have hung conservatives for being liberal extremists, like the opposite of what liberalism meant back then, and in the 40s, right? So it's not that long ago at the end of the day. So that's where we really lost a lot. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you for that thought. Wiretap, what you were just saying, I think like a few minutes ago, actually sort of just started to like click and resonate with me because it's like, let's say you are a group of foreign people living in Canada, and let's say you have a very tribal mindset. You are going to take these bills to the bank. You're going to take this new legislation. You know what I mean? It's like you can operate as coordinated as you'd like as a tribe. You can totally be advocating for your tribe, causing problems, your tribe doing this, doing that. But it's like if anybody points out this pattern of what your tribe is doing, well, actually, that's illegal. That's you're vilifying us. You're detesting us. It's the perfect force field for any sort of like tribal entity that's operating in Canada because it's like, hey, you can't say this about Sikhs.
It's like exactly. It's exactly like when Whitey Bulger signed that deal with the FBI, and then he just ran amok and took over the entire drug trade. It's going to be the same thing for identifiable groups in Canada. They're going to use our own laws, and we've seen this time and time again. We've seen it with Muslims, we've seen it with Indians, we've seen it with every single group that comes here. They use our system and our laws against us. And this is exactly what this bill is going to do. It's going to shield them, and they're going to target people like me or you who speak out against it, and then we are going to get vilified and punished for it.
And in the meantime, like what do? They make a country within a country. They form their own community. They don't integrate. It's not multicultural. They pile into one community, Brampton, based on their own ethnicity, their shared culture and values, and that grows and expands to another community. And when you walk down there, you feel like you're another. You feel like like what does Canada feel like to us now, guys? It feels like we're on a permanent vacation into the third world on our own soil, right? Because
now I don't have to ever go on a trip to India because I already know what it's like. I mean, you gotta look on the bright side, Greg. I do want to throw a wrench into this conversation, and I don't know, Natasha Montreal, I see you're here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but there's wars going on overseas, and as I said, part of what political leaders do, they vilify their enemy. And here is a tweet of a video from Benjamin Netanyahu, who famously said, this is right around the time that they were about to like bomb Gaza or whatever. Bibi says, this is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization. It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life. Now, this sounds like very beautiful, flowery language, but in reality, this is vilifying Gazans or vilifying, a group of people justifying right before a bunch of bombs are going to drop on the area. And this was retweeted by Roman Baber, a conservative MP. So like, when it comes to foreign wars, like, is it okay to endorse other politicians who are certainly to some degree promoting hatred against an identifiable group? Because the same thing also happened with Putin as well. Like, you could find other examples where Putin dude, I remember right after the convoy when the Russia Ukraine thing broke out. I told my parents, I'm like, I was just on the phone with them, and I'm like, I don't really know if it's as simple as Putin just being this evil guy who wants to take over the world. Like, I kind of took a neutral stance, and my parents got so upset at me for having a neutral stance on this topic. And I say that because that's how powerful the messaging was. They're like, wait, you don't think Putin is a villain? What the fuck is wrong with you? Right? So like, this is another example of how the news media and our politicians effectively do vilify people all the time, especially when it comes to, major geopolitical, moves and war that goes on overseas. Like, it's funny how they're trying to criminalize detesting and vilifying people when it comes to being the ruling class. That's kind of like one of your main tools. That's one of your main like tactics to get people to move. You use fear, you use anger to try to manipulate the masses to do one thing or another. Oh, we got Natasha here. I just said approve. I'd love to hear what Natasha has to say on this.
Hello, Natasha. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, it's a bit glitchy. So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
100%.
Okay, so what was your question?
No, I just made a comment about how you could probably make the argument that Roman Baber contributed to vilifying or detesting an identifiable group by retweeting Bibi Netanyahu's comment saying this is a clash between barbarism and civilization. Whether you could say that's like Palestinians he was targeted towards, or whether it was targeted towards Muslims.
Yeah, it was probably targeted towards Hamas, which is a terrorist group, but I haven't read it, so I can't comment on that. But what I can comment on is that, like, if you pull up the tweet, I'll comment on what I can read, but I can't comment on what, like, a quote I haven't read. But
I can read the quote off if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you specifically want my opinion on that, I'll give you one. But I think that 100% this legislation is going to be targeted towards people like me who are reporting on what's going on our streets. And I get it literally every day. Every day I get comments from people, basically veiled threats. Now, I don't know if the average person is going to go through with a veiled threat, but I know that in reporting on like pro-Hamas groups, there's a lot of money behind these groups, and they're very litigious. So, and I've been threatened on film before. You're going to hear from my lawyer. So I mean, it will limit freedom of the press. It will limit the ability of people to report.
For speaking out against like Hamas and like that aspect of the political spectrum,
I live in Montreal, and there's a lot of pro Hamas groups here. It's not just pro Hamas. It's like they've transitioned now into pro IRGC, but they're basically fledgling groups. Some are student groups that are funded through the U.S. through parents, charities through the U.S. and student organizations, and others are like Montreal for Palestine. There's also Toronto for Palestine, and I think maybe Mississauga for Palestine. But those are they're a more virulent group than the student organizations. Right. The student organizations generally meet with Queers for Palestine, and they meet with the unions and the Marxists. But Montreal for Palestine is affiliated with a lot more extremist activity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're transition people from like Black Lives Matter to,
And just Yeah,
Yeah,
just to
but
keep it.
that's like my concern with this is that just even reporting raw footage and profiling individuals, like I broke a story on someone who had a Discord server, and he was a student at Dawson. He was in the Muslim Student Association and Islamic Relief, and so you worry: are you going to be taken to court for supposed targeting and vilification, where you're just reporting on the facts?
And
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you challenge the
Islamophobia.
Zionist view of that? Do you challenge the Zionist view of that as
Nathan,
well, or
Nathan,
is is
Nathan.
it just one side?
I'm gonna run
Sorry,
the
I'm
space,
hearing
okay?
too many people at the same
Oh,
time.
go
I'm
ahead,
not
buddy.
sure what to. Yeah.
You mentioned that veiled threats you've received and also legal threats. And was this from specific groups or just like messages online or?
No, it's from people like in public in real life, like the leaders of these organizations. Like one said, "I'll see you in court." That hasn't happened, but I don't know, if he was just trash talking or if he meant it. Like it's very hard to know. I've done reporting on the Muslim Association of Canada, and they have an unbelievable amount of money invested and going into properties and in organizations, mosques, and then various learning centers and private schools across the country. Like these are not broke, broke guys, non-guys online. You know what I mean? Like
Do you know?
so
Because
that's
there's a
what
lot of
what
there's a lot of left wing groups, obviously, that are very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and that sort of thing. Do you have any like high level examples of, leftist Canadian politicians who you think have, contributed to vilification or detestation of an identifiable group?
Well, I mean, I think white people are vilified in Canada daily. I don't know if that counts because in the legislation, it's basically only minority groups.
Right, yeah, and what we're trying to do, kind of with this space, is kind of like break down, like get some receipts and specific examples of like one time this politician said this, which is an example of something close to detestation or vilification of an identifiable group. But I do agree with what you're saying.
So I mean, it's very vague to even try to quantify that, but I think outcomes matter, and we're seeing with, like, let's put it this way. I've tried to explain because people are very focused on, and it's understandable, they're very focused on their own province. So I focus a lot on what's happening with Muslim extremists because we have a very large Muslim population in Montreal. It's not like that in the other provinces. In the other provinces, people may have more Indigenous extremists, like in Alberta, and I'm seeing the protests there with Francis Widdowson. And out in BC, it's a mix. You have, the Indigenous, you have whatever. In Toronto, you may have the Calistanis, and then also the Muslim extremists. You might have other groups. And people are very focused on the groups that are causing issues where they live. So I do get a bit of tunnel vision because I'm a Montrealer and because I've followed Islam and nationalism since university. It's one of the areas of specialization that I did in my degree. So now it's kind of playing out in real life. But in terms of like hostility towards Canadians, I mean, and towards Christians and white people, yes. I mean, it happened in Montreal when Sean Boyd came. I don't know if anybody followed that, but he came. He couldn't even give a concert in Montreal, and Antifa came in, threw a smoke bomb. It was an absolute shiza show. There were police everywhere. The church was fined. Restoration Church was fined for hosting him. So I don't see how that isn't promoting vilification against Christians if a Christian can't even come and perform. I mean, that's Valerie Plante. That would be the ex-mayor of Montreal, but I don't know, like I can't rattle off the top of my head exactly the words that she used, but she implied that his being there would cause hostility towards homosexuals and various other groups. So it's kind of like vilifying while playing the victim at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but but the thing is, people need to understand, like, I've been through the court system in Canada, and we have anarcho tyranny. So you can have the best legal arguments in the world, but the chances are you're going to hit a liberal appointed judge, and they're full on Marxists. So it's great and strategic and hopeful to be trying to put together a strategy of dealing with all of this, but I'm very, very concerned about it, which is why I spoke out against it, but yeah.
No, that's a good example with the that recording artist that came here, because I think there was like a chorus of different politicians who chimed in, or like leftists who chimed in support of his cancellation, if I'm not mistaken. Like people were like
well, I believe he was sorry to interrupt you. I believe he was also canceled in other provinces, not just in Quebec, but in Quebec it became violent. So that was the difference. Like, and to me, if the mayor is canceling permits that were given to him to perform, and then a private religious, a church welcomes him to have a worship night, and the police have to go to protect worshipers who are there to see him, and then the perimeter is broached by someone who is actually a Department of National Defense employee who's Antifa affiliated, who throws smoke bombs at the performer. Like, if that is not inciting people, like, I don't know what would be inciting people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you brought up something earlier, which we've mentioned, but we didn't really dig into, which is obviously there's the opportunity for the state or the government to, use this bill or use these laws to kind of pick on people they don't like. We kind of have this multicultural mess now in Canada. Tons of different groups, different factions hate each other. But it's also an opportunity for different factions to also use the bill or use these laws against people they don't like. And you were kind of alluding to how, Muslim groups pick on you and, veiled threats, and I think you said legal threats as well. And I think it would be a mess.
Nobody's actually, like, people have physically assaulted me, but nobody's actually sued me yet. So I've been assaulted. I don't know how many times. It would be impossible for me to count. But in terms of actually being dragged through the courts, fortunately, at least that hasn't happened yet. But I expect it might now, following this legislation.
Right, exactly. And I think that would certainly go both ways. Like, I think Muslim groups would be going after Jewish groups, and Jewish groups would be going after Muslim groups, and I think it would be a huge mess. No, you're hateful. No, we're hateful. Whatever. And I guess I kind of want to get your thoughts on the fact that
there's a big difference, though, because so I hear this like conflation a lot. I guess I find it irritating because it's, again, like one of my areas of specialization. But one of the things that's conflated a lot is, like, Jews are not a monolith. They're basically evenly split between being 50% conservative in Canada and 50% progressive. And it's not the US where, the majority are progressives. It's not the same thing. We have a different diaspora. And much like with most, white Canadians, the levers of power are really controlled more by the progressive Jews. They're kind of the official Jews, the same way as the official Christians are the ones that invite trannies into their united churches, and I don't even consider them Christians. So it's kind of a very similar discussion among the Jewish community. I'm not Jewish. I don't speak for them, so nobody take it as me like the cash. This is my analysis. So Jewish progressive groups lobbied behind C9 to support it. Jewish conservative groups did not. They don't get any kind of airtime or coverage the same way conservative groups do.
Well, hold on. Doesn't the Conservative Party endorse CIJA all the time?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not CPC, so to be honest, I don't want to be nasty, but I have a lot of contempt for them, and I don't follow a lot of what they do. Like,
CIJA funds a lot of the conservative members.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. I can't speak to that. I'm not a CPC member. I haven't supported the Conservative Party of Canada since Harper's first term. So like I'm not on the up and up and what's going on in that party, to be honest. But all of this is to say that yes, there is lawfare against against people who are attacking, you know, synagogues and beating people up and stuff. But they're not winning. So one side is winning, and it's the Muslim side is winning. Like the CRA, and like I'll be the last person to say that our tax institutions are amazing, but they actually did a very good. I read a 115-page report that they did on the Muslim Association of Canada. They worked for a very long time on this report, and they basically tied them to financing that was going to terrorist groups overseas. And what ended up happening was the Muslim groups that were singled out in this report, like the Muslim Association of Canada, just brought them endless lawfare, and it's still ongoing. I think the report might have finished in 2016. So it's like Islamophobia, alleging this, alleging that. They're doing, like, the Muslim population is large in Canada in terms of being a minority. It's about 5%. That was in the last census. So it's going to be a lot bigger the next census. That was 5 years ago. And there's a lot, like there are a lot of Muslim MPs, and
Sorry, what was?
you know,
Sorry to cut you off. What did you say? The legal action that the Muslim Association of Canada like took some legal action or something?
yeah, against the CRA, accusing them of targeting them because they're Islamophobic and not because the CRA was concerned about terrorist financing overseas. It's a really long report. I don't want to say anything to put myself in a position of getting sued because I don't have the report right in front of me. But it was basically connecting the Muslim Association of Canada, which is like a massive, massive association. Like if anybody in any province wants to look up, you know, Muslim Association of Canada, what they have going on in their own province, they'll have something going on. Whether it's a private school, whether it's a mosque, whether it's a learning center, whatever. And they create kind of like, you know, it's community, right? But they create a lot of different funding through real estate holdings and things that normally religious organizations are not allowed to do. Like one of the findings in the CRA report was on, I believe it was over $10 million in real estate that, you know, the investments that are not permitted by charities, right? But my point is not that there are not progressive Jews that are litigious and that focus on that. They're almost like, I don't want to be unkind, but they're almost like operating in a different time. Like they haven't like updated the software to understand who are the people that are targeting Jews at this point.
You're talking about leftist Jews?
Yes, because leftist Jews are not critical of Muslims. It's the right of center Jews. They're saying like, look, this is the threat. These are the people that are literally beating us up in the street. These are the people that are shooting at the synagogues and at the girls' schools. They will call out and they'll talk about immigration and they'll talk about that. But the progressive side are concerned about like the phantom 5 white supremacists in Canada. Like it's like they're older people operating in a different time frame. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay, yeah. Natasha, do you think that this bill, though, is going to be weaponized? Like, do you think the Muslims are going to weaponize it against the Jews and the Jews are going to weaponize it against the Muslims? Or do you think that...
I don't think that the Jews will have any success whatsoever if they try and weaponize it. They may think that it will work out that way. I don't think it will.
But do you think it's more likely that white Christians are going to be targeted by this bill?
Of course.
Yes, by Muslims. That's what I think will happen. That's my anticipation.
You don't think Jews are going to target white Christians either?
I mean, I've never been targeted by Jews in my life, and I'm a very outspoken Christian. I have physically been assaulted more times than I can tell you in our streets by
What's-
Muslim activists,
what's-
like in front of police.
What's interesting is that, you know, there was this clip from Andrew Lawton. Maybe you've seen it. He was talking, you know, he was opposing Bill C-9, and he says, you know, hundreds of Christian groups oppose this bill, hundreds of Muslim groups oppose this bill, and like a dozen rabbis. So like if you actually go like pound for pound, religious group for religious group, Christians oppose it.
I don't think that many. I don't know how many Christian groups. Like my church that I go to is a traditional Bible believing church, but I'm fairly knowledgeable about the Christian community, and a lot of Christian churches are just as woke and progressive as, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, maybe that's true, but like, let's put it this way. It's conservatives are not the people that normally have advocacy groups, and that's the same across religions. So there will be Muslims who are aligned in terms of values with me. They would be the Muslims that were opposed to like all the trans ideology, right? But they're not the people that have the Muslim advocacy groups. They're still running along with the socialists. It's the same across all religious lines.
Well,
So you're not going to see like a huge representation of Jewish conservatives among the advocacy groups. Like I only know one conservative advocacy group that's Jewish off the top of my head. And I can't think of a single conservative Christian advocacy group off the top of my head. I'm not saying they don't exist, but it's like, because conservatives are working, we have kids, we're busy, we have families, we have jobs. We're not getting paid by the government to have advocacy groups, right?
There's tons of pro-life Christian groups.
Yeah, no, you're making
Pardon?
fair points. You're making fair points. Hold on. You're making fair points, but in terms of like large amounts of groups who are opposing C9, there is like hundreds of Christian groups. There is hundreds of Muslim groups, including the one that you just mentioned, Muslim Association of Canada. They actually oppose Bill C9 as well.
Yeah, but that's just because they want to be able to say that they can, kill the Jew behind the tree, which is part of their scripture, and like kill all the non-believers, including Christians. And
you think
know what? I don't have a problem.
Hold on. You think that's the only reason that a Muslim person would oppose Bill C9?
Yes. Because their book, if you've read the Quran, I have like multiple copies literally right behind me.
Hold on. So Jews are not a monolith, but Muslims are, in your opinion?
Well, there's a big difference between the two faiths. One has been reformed and one hasn't. Like I've lived in Saudi. I know what I'm talking about on this topic. I'm happy to engage, but I'm not just speaking out of some kind of prejudice. I have Muslim friends and they understand the issues with Islam. There are over 50 examples of how Islam plays out in reality. So it's not Natasha Graham's personal opinion. Like you can look to the countries and see what happens.
Right, but like, you were saying that, there's left-wing Jews and there's right-wing Jews, and you're kind of saying that all Muslims are left-wing, but like, there's plenty of
A majority of Muslims are left-wing in Canada. That's the statistical fact. The overwhelming majority, over 90%.
Right, and these censorship bills, if we could call them that, you think are generally leftist coded. Would you agree with that?
Leftist, I don't know what that means.
If they want to stop hate, this is generally something that a left-wing person would do to, they want to stop hate. They want to, kill freedom of expression to stop the bigots. Like it's like a more leftist coded thing. My question is if
what are you getting at?
You're saying that Muslims are so associated with the left, the epitome of the far left, the epitome of the far left would be Antifa, who certainly supports Bill C9. So the question is then why does a bunch of Muslim groups oppose C9 if they're allegedly always left wing, like you're saying?
I didn't say always. I just said over like about 90% vote left in Canada, which is factual. Because they want to be able to express and preach their hate in their mosques and on the streets. And so this will interfere with that. But you should look up, because it's like I don't want to monopolize your space or
and I guess
anything,
this is
but
why, and obviously this is why Jews support it then. And you think so? It's only natural that a lot of pretty well.
it's only half of Jews support it. Like you're creating the averages that I work with are based on voting patterns, and they're also based on what happens in Muslim countries
Right, but
versus, Israel and then versus the diaspora.
But
So I'm
it's-
not just like generalizing out of thin air.
Right, but you kind of, it sounds like you have sympathy for why Jewish people would want C9 to pass if they think that it's going to help them, silence Muslims who are, you're saying, all calling for the death of Jews.
I don't have sympathy. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I understand the logic behind it. I think it's irrational. I disagree with it. I've said that to so many people because I try and talk to people across the aisle, but it absolutely is not going to work the way that they think it will.
So if you're against Bill C9, do you think Muslims should still have that right to preach from their Quran? Like,
I think that Islam is completely counter to Western civilization and that we should not be bringing Muslims into Canada,
I
period.
agree with you there.
But I think in terms of what happens in the mosque, it's very complicated because, like, obviously, if people know the Bible, there are many passages that are, strident and kind of, they're pretty crazy. Like some, when you get into the Old Testament, you're reading through it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like if you're unfamiliar with it, because if it's decontextualized, it's very confusing to people. I think people should be able to say heinous things, hateful things, nasty things, awful things. My line personally is defamation, lying about people, and endorsing terrorism. So what I am reporting on the streets of Canada is people saying they basically want to destroy anybody who disagrees with them. They're climbing churches. They're setting off smoke bombs on churches. They're saying they want to destroy all the Zionists, all the Christians standing in their way. They're endorsing terrorist groups. They're saying Hezbollah chants. Like that, I don't think should be permitted in Canada. This is Canada. This is not the Middle East. Like, get this off our streets.
That's an incitement to violence, though.
Yes, it's endorsing terrorism. But my argument to Jewish progressives was people who are assaulting, harassing, intimidating, physically assaulting in front of police officers, inciting terrorism, literally giving like Hamas and Hezbollah speeches. Those are designated terrorist organizations in Canada. All of those people that are not being charged, they're not going to be charged with hate now. Like, grow up. Like, come on.
No, I know that they're not going to be charged with hate.
But I'm saying that the people that were desperate, kind of, let's say from the Jewish community, from the progressive side, who thought this would help, they're desperate and they think this will help. It's not going to help. It is not going to help. There are crimes that are being committed that are much worse, and people are not being arrested for them. So it's a fool's errand to support this is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Well,
like I disagreed. I was very, very upset that anybody would support this, but it's just so misguided that progressive Jews think this is going to help. It's like you're not winning any of these legal wars.
Well, what I had never understood is, you're right. A lot of left-wing Jews oppose or they want C9, and you're saying naively. But the thing is, Jews across the board are like, they're like, anti-Semitism is a problem. Anti-Semitism is a problem. Anti-Semitism is a problem. And it's like, do something about the anti-Semitism. And it's like, how does that not perfectly play into what you could use C9 for? That part never made sense to me.
But
'Cause,
it
like,
won't. Yeah, but Greg, you don't understand. Like, there are people being physically assaulted in Montreal
which is already
who are
illegal,
getting
yeah.
off on it. Who are getting off on it. Like there was a visibly Jewish guy who was beaten up in front of his kids. His kippah was thrown by I don't know if the guy had citizenship or not, but he was like a foreigner, basically, maybe raised here, whatever. And the judge said that, well, it wasn't the judge, but he had like a psych eval. He was found to be unwell, even though he'd been participating in all of the like pro-Hamas marches or whatever. And then it was said that his psych condition was exacerbated by the hot weather. So like, I can understand the fear when people are being assaulted out of the blue for no reason. Like if girls' school, like Christian girls' schools were being shot at, and there wasn't a lot of appetite to really do anything about it, I would also be really worried. But this just isn't the place to put the energy. Like it's totally ineffective, and all it's going to do is make it more difficult for people like me to report on what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I want to move on to a new topic. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on all that, Natasha. I think we got,
my pleasure.
I think we got Esma V in the wings here, and I wanted to talk about people who are critical of the LGBTQ plus ideology, specifically, that ideology being taught to children, or people who disagree with, trans women are women. We even have like an example of CSIS at one point saying, what do they say? They said that like people who are critical of gender ideology are like more prone to violence or something like this. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Is it Esme? Big Dragon Energy? Are you aware of this stuff?
Esme. Yeah, it's me.
Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, go ahead.
This thing that CSIS said of like you got to be afraid of these people who are critical of gender ideology because they're violent. And it's like, okay, CSIS, I think you should be focused on terrorists, but
yeah, CSIS at one point in their threat report named gender critical feminists or women as an extremist group, although they did say that we didn't present a clear and present danger, but that we're on their list to watch. So yeah, that's just women gathering together to speak about our concerns about being infiltrated by perverts. That we're apparently that makes us extreme, and we need to be watched by the spy agency.
Yeah, you fall under the IMVE framework.
Yeah, and
what
this
framework?
Ideologically motivated violent extremist groups.
Right.
Basically,
right.
if you they're just tying together having an ideology with violent extremism. It's very, very hack, very very clever.
Yeah, and the irony of it is that the only people doing any violence are opponents, because there have been many incidents of so-called trans people and their allies attacking women, both in Canada and around the world. And so, for instance, we Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights, of which I'm a founding member and I'm on the steering committee, we had our national annual conference in Montreal a couple of weeks ago. And so it was our third annual. We have to spend our own money on security guards just to make sure that nobody gets hurt. We also have to go to great lengths not to publish the location of where we're holding these so that the trans activists don't show up and threaten us with rape and death. So the fact that CSIS has us on a list and not the trans activists is just so Canada 2026. It's disgusting.
You answered your own question. It's the IMVE framework was built from Barbara Perry's research into far-right extremism. And so they built this category. So there's RIVE, which is like religiously motivated, or RMVE, which that's where Islamic terrorists fall under. And then IMVE is more right-wing ideology, and you fall within that ideology. Their crimes are listed as either civil unrest or political action. So they don't have a specific category. So because they don't have their own category, they're not being watched by our intelligence agencies.
And it's crazy that we are considered a right-wing extremist group because we have been explicit in the fact from our very founding that we're nonpartisan. And in fact, we have over 220 women in our national network of vetted associates who come from every single party. We have all parties represented, and we're all working together peacefully towards the one goal of restoring sex reality in law and public policy in Canada.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how twisted our reality is right now. Anybody who disagrees with the statement trans women are women, anybody who doesn't think trans kids are a legitimate thing, you're automatically demonized as a far right fascist. And like, what a twisted world we live in. And we're gonna go over more examples. So definitely chime in as we keep going. But another one is and again, just to reiterate the kind of topic, the kind of point is we're trying to find examples of Canadian institutions like CSIS or Canadian politicians participating in the detestation and vilification of Canadian citizens or identifiable groups, ideally. But this one is from same topic, having to do with people who are gender critical. What term do you use, Big Dragon Energy? What's your, like, do you like, what's this kind of like short form that you like?
Right. So we started off calling ourselves gender critical, but we have even rejected the term gender because it's a postmodernist bullshit term.
I like it.
So now we call ourselves reality based, and that's kind of, or sex realist, reality based. That's how mainly, but a lot of women call themselves gender critical. A lot of women call themselves still TERFs, and many call themselves that in an ironic way because they're not radical feminists.
Right. They're just owning the label, owning the slur. But this next example.
Exactly.
This next example is from Justin Trudeau, February 2024. He said, far-right politicians pick fights with trans kids. Shame on them. This was responding to Alberta's parental rights policies on gender transition. Trudeau declared at a press conference, so far-right politicians pick fights with trans kids. Shame on them. He framed the leader of the opposition and any parent concerned about gender medicine for minors as targeting vulnerable children, characterizing an entire political movement as predatory towards children. This is certainly vilification at the very least, coming from our own Prime Minister.
Absolutely it is. The very concept that any man could declare himself a woman is deeply, deeply offensive to any woman who's aware and any man who's aware, and vice versa. Greg, that if any woman can just say, I'm a man, it's offensive to men. No, you're not. You have no idea what it's like to be a man. You don't know what it's like to grow up as a boy and the kind of pressures on boys and young men. You have no idea of any of this, and vice versa, right?
Yeah, and back to sort of the absurdity of some of these things that they're trying to police, with C9 and with the kind of further enforcement of preventing this emotion of hatred. It's like deeply held beliefs, like, forget religion. It's like, yeah, I have a deeply held belief that there's men and women. And it's like, to disagree with that, to have people gaslighting me to believe that that's not true, to have, children being taught this, and to expect people not to get angry, to expect people not to feel a little bit hateful of this going on, like it's really, really twisted that they want to do this. They want to try to police people's emotions on something that's obviously going to provoke all sorts of emotions. Like, what is a stronger emotion of, like, rage and fighting than, like, the mother bear instinct? Like, get away from my cubs, you tranny freak. But, I'm just saying that as an example of,
Yeah.
it's a very real
exactly.
emotion, right?
I agree. And what about the moral injury that occurs when the state forces you to lie and say words that are not true and fly in the face of objective reality, like to call a man a woman? And isn't that like a tenet of Western society, is that you don't lie?
Well, yeah. I mean, it does get in. You get in some really, like, what's the word? Very profoundly deep stuff when it's like 2 + 2 = 5. You need to say man is women. You need to say this. Yeah, totally twisted. No, there's something there though. I'll go on to this next example. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Oh, this is after the Million March for Kids the first time around. He condemned thousands of protesters' parents as promoting hate. So when hundreds of thousands of Canadians, including large numbers from Muslim and Sikh communities, participated in the 1 Million March for Children to protest gender ideology in schools, Trudeau posted on social media, quote, "Transphobia, homophobia, and biphobia have no place in this country. We strongly condemn this hate and its manifestations." And, when you get to control the conversation like that, you make it seem like, yeah, all these people are hateful and evil. It's like, no, you're actually vilifying and demonizing concerned parents of all colors, of all stripes, because they're concerned about their children being indoctrinated with dangerous ideas where they, hey, kid, chemically castrate yourself. Like, this is, it's just so evil. But this is another kind of good example of Justin Trudeau participating in this. Do you remember that? When did you first kind of come into being more of an activist, Big Dragon Energy? Were you around for the that first Million March for Children in 2023? Yep.
In fact, I think I walked and talked with you at the second one, but I was at them both, and I first got involved when Jordan Peterson put out that first series of videos in 2016, when Bill C-16 was going through Parliament, and I got really interested in it because he was taking the tack of the compelled speech angle, and that was very important to me. That, and the argument that he made is like, oh yeah, sure, we already have hate speech laws in this country. We've all sort of accepted them to one degree or another. The bar is very high to meet the test of hate speech, so it doesn't often get tested in court. So the status quo has been okay, not optimal. But he said, when we get into Bill C-16 and you make me in my place of work use preferred pronouns that do not adhere to objective reality, that, and on pain of, punishment, that becomes compelled speech, and we are crossing a red line, and we're going directly into totalitarianism. And so that got my interest. And then once I started going down that rabbit hole, I realized that of the transing of children. And I started looking into that, and I went, okay, this can be the hill that I die on, because, vulnerable children are being harmed. And then, of course, it led me to the women's issue of what exactly is going to happen to our charter guaranteed sex-based protections, which means that we get sex segregated spaces for obvious reasons that we all understand, that men don't want women in their private spaces where they're in states of undress or vulnerable because they're ill or whatever. And women don't either. And women are at great risk when men breach that boundary. So that's, and then we started, and then Yaniv hit, Mr. Wax My Balls, in 2019, and this C-16 came into force in 2017, and there were many witnesses at the Senate hearing.
Sorry, I'm just thinking,
And,
Jessica Yaniv cannot wait for C9 to pass. She's going to be on the phone every single day. She's going to be calling the Attorney
Right?
General every day. Can you charge this guy with hate speech? Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
he's black or whatever. Like, can you charge him with hate speech,
He's
please?
hateful.
Anyway.
He's hating on me. Yeah.
Those are
So
the
then
people
that
who
happened.
weaponize their feelings to,
Totally.
anyway.
And then, so that was the inciting incident for us to gather together. First of all, it was 10 of us women who got together and said, we need a national organization of women to fight this bullshit. And it didn't exist. So we said, okay, let's build it. And that's where it started in 2019. Yeah. That's a long answer to your short question.
Esme, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
You obviously have put a lot of thought into your messaging to counter arguments and just kind of deflect your opposition. Do you believe that our existing messaging from our governments, for example, harms reduction or safe supply or something protecting trans, or these sorts of messagings that they create, do you think that they're psychologically harmful and could fall under some sort of hate motivated crime?
That's a really good question. I think that when you have the regulating bodies behind you, like we do with the Canadian Medical Association, the Pediatric Association, whatever guild of psychiatrists and psychotherapists and whatever, I think it's really hard to make that argument. Just like it was during COVID, when the courts just deferred to the medical organizations and said, well, we're not in any position to rule on this. We just we follow the lead of the scientists and the medical professionals.
Did you have a follow-up to that, Wiretap?
No, I'm fine. It's
so
good. Yeah.
This is another interesting article I found in terms of just the mess that C9 presents related to the LGBTQ stuff. This is in 2023, again, Justin Trudeau. He was telling Muslim parents that their own beliefs were, quote, American right-wing disinformation. So essentially, I think this is in Alberta, actually. And there was some Muslim representative that said, I ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, please protect our culture, our belief, the sin that you are doing to them. A member of the Muslim community told Trudeau. And then Trudeau responded by saying, this was in Calgary because Muslim parents were protesting LGBTQ curriculum in the schools. And Trudeau told them there is an awful lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. People on social media, particularly fueled by the American right wing, are spreading a lot of untruths about what is actually in the curriculum. Wow. So just trying to gaslight Muslims to be like, no, this isn't your actual belief. It was Trump. Trump did this. And that's just like a crazy like mix of different. I mean, is that detestation? Is that vilification? That's sort of a weird like detesting of the American right, which is something that we brought up earlier and we might dive back into, which is kind of the response to Charlie Kirk, the kind of like generic demonization of Trump every single day, like that type of detestation and vilification. I mean, that's just normal. That's just like breathing. Esme, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, it just occurred to me that there is a very clear example of detestation that happens all the time. And so many people in the sex realist community who are lesbian and gay, they absolutely despise the use of the word queer. And the politicians have picked up that term just like hot shit, right? And they just love throwing around that term. And it's extremely hurtful and painful, especially to many older homosexuals who they were actually being called queer as somebody was punching them in the face years ago. You know, it doesn't, thankfully, gay bashing doesn't happen that often in Canada anymore, but they're old enough to remember that, right? And to hear a politician say queer, to me, it's like, what if the politicians suddenly started using the N-word to seem cool? You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's kind of equivalent.
That's interesting. I kind of like that idea. A term that's kind of been politicized is seen as like a hurtful slur to another group. One group thinks it. This isn't bad actually, because really part of the absurdity of the law is really that is like, you know, people are going to have subjective experiences about all sorts of different things, whether it's war, whether it's like this, you know, this gender ideology to a Christian perspective, or even just a sex realist. And I was also thinking too, as you started speaking, I thought you were going to go to this, but, and this really applies. This could actually really be a dynamite argument potentially. No one is more hated than a gay who doesn't agree with the rest of the gays, a lesbian who doesn't agree with like the lesbian leftists, a trans person who is like, you know, not in line with what the leftists are supposed to believe. Or, and there's probably another example for when you're, a non-white person. I was going to say person of color, but I hate giving that term, credibility. I think that's a stupid term. But yeah,
I agree.
But yeah, anytime like a non-white person has some sort of right-wing idea, the leftists are like, they hate that person, especially because it's like, you're supposed to be one of our diverse warriors on the left. It's like, huh?
Yeah, you're off the plantation now. But
maybe you could even use the term like what is it, coon or whatever? Isn't there like a term for like a black person?
Yeah, that the blacks use for other blacks who they think are betraying them and by acting too white or something like that.
And then what was that, Natasha?
The term is Oreo.
Oreo, yeah.
Very good.
Uncle Tom.
And
house N-word.
House
they
N-word,
call them a
right.
house N-word. Yeah.
And then once again, with the sort of social and cultural conditioning that's at play, well, it's okay to demonize and vilify and detest these people because they don't have the right political opinion.
Well, we've probably all heard it. I've heard it many times that conservative gays say it was harder to come out as a conservative than it was to come out as a gay. That's something, right?
That's interesting. Because I think this is before you got here, Esme, but one of the arguments that I think is worthy of bringing forth to senators is to clearly show them, because a lot of this hate legislation hinges on this term identifiable group. You know, they're not saying that detesting and vilifying a person is illegal. They're saying if you detest or vilify an identifiable group. But here's the thing. Identifiable group does not consider political views. This definition is 50 years old. It's before social media. It's before the Trump era. It's before this like totally toxic and now violent, you know, polarized political climate we now have. And it's like, if you are a serious legislator in 2026 and you want to stop hate and you're going to have this definition of identifiable group that does not include this, then like you're a jokester. You're a jester. Not that I want to fix, again, I've said this before, like not that I want to fix this bill, but it's more to just throw the whole thing out of like, you guys are clowns if you think this is going to work.
They're clueless. They live in their little bubbles and they don't understand that. And we all know this and we all feel it. This is the most divisive culture that Canada has ever had, like, you know, environment, milieu that we've ever seen in Canada ever. Like, I'm old enough to remember when you just didn't know how people were voting unless they were working for the party. And if they wanted to put a sign on their front lawn, the ballot box was sacred. It was secret. And you didn't ask somebody who they voted for. Like, that was kind of like asking them what their salary was. Like, it was rude. You wouldn't do it. And it was understood that people voted their conscience. It was deeply held beliefs, and you had the right to vote however you wanted. And conservatives and liberals and NDPs mixed together in social circles, and they might occasionally spar at a dinner party over certain issues, but it was all very civil.
Mm-hmm. Your friendships weren't contingent on your political beliefs either.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So this other example that's come up here is when Jordan Peterson had to undergo re-education or lose his license. It says here that it was because of his tweets being critical of the gender ideology. Do you know if that's true?
Yeah, there were a couple of different ones. I remember there were those tweets. There was the fact that he stated openly that he would not use somebody's preferred pronouns. He would not be compelled to do so. I believe he said, I will make that decision myself, which pronouns I will use. I will not be told by the university how I will speak to people. And then also I remember there was one big brouhaha when there was a Sports Illustrated cover, and it was an obese woman. And he just remember that he said something like, no, that's not beautiful, or something like that. It wasn't even like mean, really. Mm-hmm. And he got pilloried for that too. So I think it was just like the grand total of him speaking his mind on social media. They did not like that because he didn't adhere to the ideology.
Absolutely. I remember reading identifiable group and thinking, because it also says like mental or physical disability. I'm like, I wonder if being obese is a disability. And then I also thought, man, if I get in trouble, I'm just going to say I have a mental disability of being autistic. That'll be my defense. Not funny? Okay. Natasha, you got your hand up. What's up?
I thought the autism joke was funny.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was laughing, but I was muted. With the Jordan Peterson and with, like, I've done I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but I've done a bunch of interviews with different civil rights lawyers. And with Jordan Peterson, I think it was the regulatory regime that got him. And what a lot of Canadians need to understand is that there's like an entire kind of pseudo legal regulatory regime that will punish you under these kind of vaguely legalistic things like, I would have to look it up, but it's like bringing the reputation of the profession into like a negative light, right? So I think that's actually how they got him. I don't think it was anything like I don't think he was sued. I think it was complaints towards his regulatory body. And so like the entire managerial regime is skewed towards creating certain outcomes. And we saw this during the COVID regime, like with doctors who were opposed to the COVID regime. Frequently, there weren't even lawsuits. It was just a regulatory thing. Like they would lose their insurance or they would lose their license, right? So that to me is very scary, like pseudo legal aspect. And then, of course, like the human rights tribunals, which are not courts, but you can still have an outcome of your life being destroyed by them. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very scary. It's not just like bills that are passed in Parliament. There's every single mechanism, if you're a professional, will be oriented towards an outcome which is for the leftist, progressive, like, you know, global homo, whatever you want to call it, like a Marxist outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of a quote that from my documentary. It's something Jojo Ruba said. It was, now we have the most sensitive people in the room determining what you can and cannot say. And it's just terrifying. We have these like, you know, super sensitive, hysterical, very emotional, very like in the worst cases, like, you know, manipulative narcissists weaponizing their emotions and hurt feelings to punish people for just saying stuff that they don't like. I do have the tweets in front of me here from Jordan Peterson. And then I think, Esme, you just put your hand up. But yeah, it was Jordan Peterson in response to Elliot Page. Elliot Page tweeted proud and to introduce a trans character on a TV show. And then Peterson wrote, "Remember when pride was a sin, ? And Ellen Page just had her breasts removed by a criminal physician." Spicy. Man, I miss these spicy Peterson tweets. Another one was, yeah, the Sports Illustrated, the overweight Sports Illustrated. He said, "Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that." As if, how ironic is that the regulatory board identified that tweet, which mentions authoritarian tolerance, as something they didn't like. Like, the irony is insane. And I believe they actually just got him in trouble for just retweeting Polyev, which is ridiculous. He also tweeted that there is no culture of Nazism or white supremacy in Canada. I think it's something to do with the Freedom Convoy. Anyway, but yeah, that's a pretty good example of just like someone getting punished for offensive things. Yeah. Esme, did you want to jump in? I am going to be wrapping it up here too, folks, because I'm getting hungry.
Cool. Yeah. I just wanted to follow up on what Natasha was saying about the regulatory bodies. And of course, we're all familiar with the Amy Ham case. Amy is a very good friend of mine. Greg, you may have interviewed her. I'm not sure. Tried to set that up, but she, of course, is the nurse she in BC who, because she speaks out on her own time on social media and is a journalist and writes about women's sex-based rights, was hauled up on the carpet by the BC College of Nurses and Midwives. And it was a 5-year ordeal. Basically, Star Chamber, and it was the most ridiculous thing. I attended by Zoom most of the hearings, but it dragged on over 5 years. and she was fired from her job, and she was recently dropped by her union. They won't represent her. And for the luxury of going through all that, she was handed like a $95,000 bill for costs. So, but she continues to fight. She's also got a couple of, she's fighting fire with fire. She's going back and charging, I think, both the college and her employer with discrimination on the basis of political belief. So, and she's not stopping. She's going to keep fighting it. She's amazing. So yes, the regulatory bodies in this country are out of control. It is, I think you used the word terrifying, Greg. It is terrifying because anybody, if you work in a regulated profession, you got to stay in line or risk your livelihood. That's totalitarian.
Yeah. And it's not even like radical. It's like, hey, you're a guy, you're not a woman. Like that's pretty well the amount, like that was her sin. That was her huge punishable offense that's like made her life hell for half a decade. It's saying, yeah, I don't think trans women are women actually. Also, I'm a nurse. So, how biology works is kind of important. No, her story is wild. I definitely hope
that
at
was
some point.
Yeah, that was part of the complaint against her was something to the effect of denigrating trans people while identifying herself as a nurse, which brought disrepute to the profession. That's what the accusation was.
Yeah. There's actually a term. I this morning I interviewed a lawyer from the UK who's part of this group called Christian Concern, and I was hearing just a lot of the stories of the silent prayers, being persecuted for silently praying outside of abortion clinics and all this. And he used this term polite persecution. And that's a really good summary of what's happening in Canada. It's like, it's not necessarily overt. It's like, it's not like super obvious to the public, but it's, it's politely being like, hey, you're being disciplined. Hey, we're taking your job away. Hey, we're not going to call you like a big, stupid, evil, dumb man. But, in so many words, like the pundits and, the trolls on Twitter, people are going to hate your guts. But, it's not like this horrible authoritarian crackdown. It is this very polite, this very sort of like professional, like, crossing the I's, dotting the T's. Here's your formal cancel culture package. Your life's over. No one's going to like you ever again. Andy Haight wrote an article about you. People think you're terrible. We didn't like technically lie, but essentially we're just kind of, building this big case about how you're a horrible person for having the wrong political opinion. So, yeah. And by the way, trying to beat this in court is going to take years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So good luck with that. It's horrible. I think we might end on that. Really, thanks so much for coming out. If anybody else, if you guys want to chime in, if you have a mic, if you want to say anything before we go, then by all means, I'll probably just wrap it up now. But the goal, did anybody else want to say anything? I'll probably wrap it up if. Nope. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to quickly say, I just wanted to quickly say, because I came in after you'd finished talking about the religious aspect of C9, is that I have been saying for probably around 20 years, I am not sure. Well, I mean, okay, it's a rhetorical question. I think we all know why. Imams in mosques are not charged with a crime because it is what they say on a regular basis is clearly incitement to violence. And that, I think that we already have laws in place to cover that. We don't need C9. I am all for free speech. If somebody wants to say unkind, nasty things, that's fine. Just grow a skin and get a backbone and know who you are. If you know who you are and you know it's untrue, then it's not going to touch you and you shouldn't pay attention to it. But clear incitement to violence, I think we can all agree that that's in the criminal code and it should stay in the criminal code, and it should be, people should be charged with a crime when they do stuff like that. And so that's where I am at. And as a Catholic lifelong and went through Catholic school, I can tell you, I have never once heard anything from the pulpit that was remotely violent or hateful in school or in church. So, and because that's not what the modern church is all about. Maybe, you know, in the books, there is some stuff that is not kind or not nice or occasionally violent, but that's no longer relied upon. And we all understand that that is not, it's not what we want to, it's not the messaging that we want. So it gets set aside. But like, as Natasha said, I believe, and I agree, Islam has not had a reformation, and therein lies the problem.
Yeah, the only issue with that is that, you know, this is kind of the whole crux of the issue, because you can go into every religious text and find things that are demonizing, probably even calling to the death of groups of people. So it's kind of like the same thing across the board. And, you know, and I would counter that to say, like, okay, we can't have these people calling for the death of people. That would be the same argument of like, well, you can't say that, you know, homosexuality is blasphemous, and like both of those things should be criminalized. You know, like, and there's really kind of like no end to that. That being said, you know, if there is like an explicit, like, you know, someone in a mosque saying like we must kill this group of people, I don't know, like, is that what they're saying? Like that, maybe that is a fair enough case.
Natasha knows more about it, but there's a website called EMRI, EMRI, and they document all of these instances where imams are telling their congregants to be violent towards people.
Interesting. Maybe we should just make it apply to Muslims then. But hey,
I just want it fairly. You know, I want the law fairly applied across the board. I don't think anybody should be inciting violence against anybody.
Yeah. No, well, it is interesting. It is interesting to, out of all the verses you could choose to pick, it's like, you seem to be picking this one about killing your enemies violently every single week. Is that what you do every week, Mr. Imam? But yeah, I don't know these specific examples. I'd have to look them up. I do remember when I first came into politics that I was like, there was the Danforth shooting, and there was like a mosque down the street that apparently was doing these like violent prayers, talking about this type of stuff. But I will give you 15 to 30 seconds, Natasha. I do want to wrap it up here, but you got your hand up. What's up?
Yeah, no, it's a Middle East Media Research Institute memory. And yeah, Esme is right. Like, it's a fool's errand if conservatives and Christians are running interference for people who want to conquer us. Like, grow up, learn what's happening in those communities, and understand 1,400 years of conquest. That's what I would say in that regard. And understand that there are people that come in large numbers who think that we're weak and soft, and they will absolutely use our laws against us and make us have to, I guess, endure subjugation under new laws because our managerial regime will not deal with them. So that's what I would encourage people to do your own research and reading.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming out. Natasha, Esme, Wiretap, thanks so much for coming out to the space. The goal for me is, the Senate is not back in for a couple of weeks. And in that time, I'm going to take the documentary I've made and make a mini documentary focused on C9, take some of these arguments and try to make the best possible argument to a senator to say, hey, this is absurd. We cannot let C9 pass. It would be a total mess. If you're on YouTube and you're watching, I did leave a link to, I think it's the CCF. Let's see if I can find it. theccf.ca/vote no to bill C9. Guys, couldn't you just make the URL C9? Anyway, but if you want, they have an automated thing to send a letter to your senator. That's theccf.ca/vote no to bill C9. Because we listen, there's still hope. There's still hope to stop this. It's on the Senate, and I'm gonna do everything I can in the time that I have to try to turn this around with the most compelling mini doc that I can. If you want to help me, because I am hiring editors to help me, then please go to givesendgo.com/save free speech. Send a donation. It'll help. It'll help with the resources I need to help turn this around in time. Because more money means I can pay more people to help with the editing. So yeah. But thanks again for coming out, guys. And until next time, you'll probably be hearing me talk about C9. Because, that is the fight right now. There is going to be the Online Harms Act just around the corner, but right now it's there's still a lot of stink to be made about C9. Because C9 is really the groundwork for stuff they just want to layer on. Because really C9 lowers the threshold of criminalizing speech. And they want to have people scouring the internet with the Online Harms Act. So if you have C9 in place, then you can more easily just take a tweet, criminalize it. But yeah, so C9 is really kind of the foundation of what they want to build up in this sort of authoritarian nightmare that they're trying to build, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks for coming out, guys. Talk to you later. Cheers. All right. YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Oh my God, we did it. I am exhausted. I'm hungry. Thanks for tuning in. Givesendgo.com/save free speech, yada, yada, yada. We're going to talk to you soon. Peace out. Thanks for watching. Love you all. And have a great weekend. Have a great weekend. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bum 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 bum. Good evening, everybody. Tonight we are. Oh my gosh, I'm hungry, bro. Oh my gosh, I'm hungry, bro.